Kia ora, Grace whānau. Welcome to another week of Grace at Your Place. It is so good to have you tuning in with us today. And in a moment, we're going to be hearing an inspiring message from one of our team. But before we jump into that, let's just pray, and then we're going to head into a time of worship together. Yeah, Father, we just thank you for every single person tuning in today. And we ask, God, that hearts will be soft and open to what you want to speak to each person. Lord, that we would hear from you, be inspired by your word and your message. And we pray this in your name, Jesus. Amen. Let's worship together.
Sing joy.
Heaven and nature sing, and
Lift it up to the Lord. Jesus, you're the exalted one. Jesus, you're the risen one. Your name be honored, Lord. Your name be honored. Yeah. Beautiful, beautiful one. Beautiful Jesus.
And a special hi to everybody joining us online and at Grace at Your Place. Today we've got a few Christmas thoughts. We're just going to be having a little bit of a look at the year that was. And it's been a very crazy year, hasn't it? It's been a
Absolutely
wild and chaotic year. And everybody I know says that they're just exhausted and that they're looking forward to holidays, looking forward to Christmas to come. Everybody wants to just lie back on a beach and forget the year that was. But Lizzie and I are going to be talking about what we've learned in amongst the pandemics and the wild elections, both here and in the United States, the All Blacks losing against Argentina and other chaotic events of the year. Whoever thought that I would go into a bank wearing a mask, but I've done that this year. Times are tough. And actually, we thought we'd start off by just having a little photographic look back on some of the interesting things of the year. You may have forgotten some of these things, but have a look at this here and see if you recognise the need for social distancing. Some people have had to buy special clothing for that. Or in this circumstance here, just getting to the supermarkets and there's nothing there. Or in this case here, a couple of people that have spent a lot of time in lockdown,
that's us, Davey, that one.
You're not supposed to say that. And wasn't there good home baking during that time? Wasn't it good home baking? We had great home baking. And imagine not being able to get out. Imagine going down to the supermarket dressed like this. Some people did. I saw some people dressed in some very serious clothing. You'll see a picture of me soon coming up. This next picture here is what it's like. You start off with great ideas about what lockdown's going to be like, and then before too long you're sitting back eating and watching Netflix. And then well, if you're a pastor, you've got to learn how to live stream. Sometimes you could even forget to put your trousers on while you're doing it, but as long as you look good from the waist up, that's all that matters. And then there's toilet paper. We have to remember that toilet paper was a very important commodity during the whole lockdown, and so I'm sure that you stocked up. And then you may have gone along to the supermarket and found that all the toilet paper had gone. And there's that old hymn, "When the roll is called up yonder," that somebody remembered. And then the first Sunday back at church. Now, this is actually the truth. The first Sunday back at church, the car park wasn't quite like that, but we had the largest attendance we'd ever had in Grace Vineyard's history. Isn't that incredible? I thought that everybody would get used to just being at home doing service. They wouldn't want to come back, but it seems like people did want to come back, and so people came back in their droves. They didn't quite drive like that, but that's just as well. And then we had to sanitise our hands, of course, didn't we? You know, there was a lot of paranoia going on, and we still should be sanitising our hands, which is good. And the next one, that's me. That's the first time I went into the supermarket, and it was very bizarre, you know, wandering around the aisles just thinking everybody could be carrying germs. I had gloves the first time, and I didn't bother after that because I thought I'm just taking the germs on my gloves to everywhere, so I took sanitizer instead. You did feel a bit paranoid going around. This one here, I thought this was quite funny when I saw it. The government made an announcement. They said, now, we're going to go into lockdown. We want everybody to social distance. You must not go to your local supermarket and start getting groceries. So what did everybody do? Everybody headed off to the supermarket to be able to buy groceries, me included. And then there was Grace at Your Place. Yeah. That was something that came very quickly. We had a few days' notice. We'd never been on live stream before. We'd never been on television before. And we had to learn very, very fast. And we've got Hamish and a wonderful team that got together, and they put us on air, which was an interesting experience.
And that's why I'm here today, because I'm pretending that this is our lounge, and then it's just Dave and I.
And there's nobody else here. I said, honey, just ignore the crowd. Just pretend they're not there. It's just you and me sitting in our lounge. And so it's been a very bizarre sort of a year. You know, now this is what it looked like at home. We were watching, this is our little grandson Marley with his little guitar, worshipping, and there's Lizzie with her guitar. She can't play.
I can't play, but he doesn't know that.
Marley can't play either. So you may have joined in Grace at Your Place at home as well. So it was lots of fun. You know, it's an interesting thing, isn't it, that around the world, In 30 different countries, people tuned into us. And the first 4 weeks, we had 41,000 people that tuned in from different places. Isn't that phenomenal? You know, people had said in the past, do you want to do something, live stream? And we said, oh, no, what's the point? You know, it just stops people coming from church. But when we started getting letters in from all over the place, people who are locked away or away from churches and different things. When we saw the letters come in of people who just love to be able to have a message of hope coming through the TV or the computer, we thought, what an amazing thing to do. So we've continued on. Shine TV has allowed us to keep going, which has been great, and also it's going out through various different media as well, which is so cool. Next photo here. Love like Jesus, but wash your hands like Pontius Pilate. There's been a lot of hand washing going on this year. I saw one good little cartoon where a man said, what did you do in 2020? He said, I washed my hands. And then, of course, there's the worship team. This is the way they dressed up when they came along for the very first time to do worship. And then the last one here, our Zoom home groups. Hopefully you were part of one of those. I actually thought when Zoom came up, I thought to myself, oh my goodness, nobody's ever going to want to attend church again. They're just going to want to do it from home. But didn't we get sick of Zoom very, very quickly? And I don't know what it is, but as soon as Zoom, if I ever have to do a Zoom meeting, I immediately start to fall asleep. I feel so tired. For some reason it takes so much energy. Anyway, that's just a little bit of the year that was. It has been a little bit chaotic, and Lizzie and I were just talking about the fact that isn't it funny that we're at Christmas pretty much already, and that Christmas comes in the midst of all the wild stuff that happens. You know, that there is just something normal in amongst the chaos. You know, during the earthquakes, I know for many of us, and Liz and I in particular, we felt very insecure during that time. One of the things that really helped me during that time was Psalm 46. That says in verses 1-3, God is our refuge and strength and ever-present help in trouble. Therefore we will not fear, though the earth gives way, the mountains fall into the heart of the sea, though its waters roar and foam and the mountains quake with their surging. Then verse 6, nations are in uproar, kingdoms fall, he lifts his voice, the earth melts. The Lord Almighty is with us, the God of Jacob is our fortress. And then verse 10, I love this, be still and know that I am God. And you know, as we've had very tumultuous times here in Canterbury and now around the world, we have been talking a lot about the fact that the world seems an insecure place. And that the only place that we can find security is in God. I remember when we had the earthquakes in February, and then I think within a month the tsunami happened in Japan. I remember watching that on television and thinking to myself, oh my goodness, is this the end of the world? And it was just so chaotic. And it was a thing where I learned, and I think Liz learned, and many of us have learned, that the only thing that is secure is coming into God's presence. And so, Lizzie, tell us from your experience about that thing, about you were talking about learning how to body surf, how your dad was teaching you to do that, and how that's taught you about security.
Well, it's just given me, I just had this picture this week, thinking about how for my life right at the moment, there's a lot of waves, so it feels quite tumultuous and feels like different things are happening, and I'll go into that down the track. But he taught us how to body surf from a very young age, and it was quite clever really, because I realise now that it made us all love the ocean, but also not be afraid of the ocean. But what he would always say is when the big waves come, you just learn to, when it's just starting to break, that's when you start swimming, and then it takes you off. And we used to have competitions with who would get to the sand the quickest, and I felt like it was a lovely picture for me of God teaching me that through the waves that life brings, and that seem to come more regularly these days. I think that's the hard thing as we go into life, is that it feels like we're holding more in tension, and things get a bit more complicated, and we've got joy and we've got sorrow. But I felt like with learning to ride the waves and teaching us that there's joy in those places. So the waves can be really rough and wild, but to be riding them and to be asking God, what is his invitation for this wave? You know, do you want me to seek the joy, the joy in it? Do you just want me to hang in there and go for it? And what is his heart in the midst of the waves? I just thought that was a beautiful picture of being able to catch those waves.
We've been talking a lot about finding God in the different seasons. You know, many people have been saying, I just can't wait till everything gets back to normal. And we all want that in some ways. But for some people, normal isn't that good anyway. Yeah. And so we've really got to learn to be able to find God in the good times and the bad times. And we've been finding, you know, as a family that we've had a lot of joy this year. You know, we've had a second grandchild. We've had a lot of fun with our first grandchild, and we've got another grandchild on the way, which is wonderful. But then Lizzie's parents are in a rest home, and they both have dementia, and it's been very difficult for you seeing them inching away little bit by little bit.
Yeah.
So we've got sadness in parts of our life, but then joy in other parts of our lives. How have you found God in those places?
Yeah, well, that's been the thing that I have actually just held on to, like with bare knuckles, you know, when you're hanging on to something and you can see the knuckles. That's what it feels like at times when you don't feel like he's there, or everything is, say, so chaotic that you're thinking, God, where are you? But that's the time to hold on even tighter and to lean into him. And one thing about life that is very, very certain is that life is uncertain and we don't know what's ahead. But in the invitation always with Jesus is to trust him with our hearts, with our sorrows, with our joys, with our questions, with our doubts. And that to me has been such it's a steadying thing for me to know that whatever happens, our third son, Josh, is about to leave and go to California to live. And it's amidst what is over there the worst COVID situation happening. And I'm trying very hard to not get panicky about that because he's my boy. But I just have to say, God, I'm trusting you. I'm trusting him into your care to know that he's going to be okay. And that
he's going over to get married, which is exciting.
It's exciting.
But then we can't be there for the wedding, which is sad. But then he's going to be with the girl he loves, which is wonderful.
Yeah.
But then there's COVID all around, which isn't so good. So
and then we'll
it's
miss him, which is sad.
Yeah. But then one day they'll come back with babies, and which is good. So you can see that in amongst the sadness, there's joy. We're finding God in all those seasons. And, you know, we found that even amidst COVID as a church. You know, it's been a difficult time for people. People have been very anxious, but our church in many ways has risen to the fore, and a lot of people have been very generous. While there have been people not having enough food to eat, a lot of people have given food, and we've been able to provide thousands of meals for people through our food warehouse and Kairos and different things that we're doing. One of the things which has been incredible is the fact that through our Grace at Your Place programs, we decided to do deaf interpreting because we've got a wonderful deaf community out at Beach Campus. And one of the things that probably is the loveliest thing that I know of this year is that we have had a lot of letters in from the parents of deaf children saying we just don't get this anywhere, the gospel coming for kids. We put sign language with all the kids programs and all the songs, and we've had the most heartfelt letters from mums and dads saying, you don't know how hard it is having disabled children, and to have this program coming out has been amazing. And one mum in Wellington actually sent us this little video we're going to show you in a moment of her little deaf girl. She has not been able to understand church. She hasn't been able to worship. And she sent us this little video of this little girl worshipping to the Grace Vineyard Passion Kids. So have a wee look at this. Doesn't that just touch your heart? We've actually had a couple of families that have written to us and said it's been such a big impact to them that they would consider moving down to Christchurch so their kids could come to Beach Campus, to our deaf community, so that because it has been such a blessing. So once again, in amongst the chaos, God's still out there working and doing things. And we've been talking about the fact that this is what Christmas is about, isn't it? Jesus coming into the chaos of the world, coming into Bethlehem, which was in chaos at the time. Honey, you've been thinking about Joseph, Jesus' dad. Tell us about what you've been thinking.
So every year with Christmas, I love Advent because every day I follow a devotional and it leads me into Christmas rather than it happening and it's all crazy and wild and it's over and then you haven't met with God in that time. So one of the things this Advent is I've been thinking about Joseph. And Joseph is often not really talked about. It's usually Mary, who I love very much because of the fact that she was so surrendering to God. But I thought about how the courage that it took Joseph to actually stay with Mary, and once he knew that she was pregnant. And it says in the Bible that he decided that when he found out, he decided he was going to leave Mary and go on his way. And that night he had a dream, and God said to him that that baby that is in Mary's womb is going to be the Messiah, Jesus, God with us, Emmanuel. And so I want you to marry her and go from here knowing that it's my child. And so I felt like we so often forget the courage that would have been behind that, for him to face the shame of what people would say, the gossip that people all around would have said, oh, there's Joseph and Mary, And in those days, it would have been such a big deal. Nowadays, it's not so frowned upon, and a baby is always a gift, in my opinion. But back then it was sort of like it was such a shameful thing. So he would have to have walked with that in his little small village and having everyone know everything about everyone. And the courage that took just to step out and to say, God, I'm following you. And that must have been a hard thing for him to do.
It's funny, isn't it, that everything about the Bethlehem story is actually chaotic, isn't it? Like nothing simple about it. That the fact that there was looked like an illegitimate pregnancy, the shame that would have surrounded that, and then having to, the census takes place at that time. What a terrible time to have a census. They've got to travel all the way from Galilee down to Bethlehem, which is a very, very long journey. She was pregnant. She had to go on a donkey. They arrived there. You would think that God could have provided a place for them to stay. But
palace, maybe?
Yeah, palace, or a 5-star hotel or something like that. But no room in the inn. They have to go into a cave or a barn or whatever, not even a bed. And then they get all these visitors. I don't know how welcome the visitors were, the shepherds and the wise men and those people. But then as soon as the baby's born, the king puts out this declaration that all the babies under 3 have to be killed. So they have to take off and go to Egypt. I mean, it's traumatic enough having a baby without all those things going on. We've had friends who've had babies recently, and even then it can be traumatic with, 5-star hospitals and wonderful medical care and everything else. Imagine in that third world country all those centuries ago, the chaos of what was actually going on.
I do love, though, the fact that in that chaos and all the craziness of that, in that very moment, that's when God sends his son to be born into the mess. And I often think about how horrid that stable must have been with the stink, the poo, the cow poo, and how stinky it must have been, how smelly it was. And it's pretty strong smell, cow poo, isn't it? And
Liz didn't grow up on a farm.
Yeah, and you wouldn't be able to escape it. Like, it's right there and it's right in your face. Nothing sanitary about the whole thing at all. And so that is a beautiful picture to me about how God comes to us in our mess, comes to us in our stink, in our stuff that we think is smelly, stuff that we think people don't want to know about, stuff that's rubbish, stuff that is messy in our lives, but that in that moment, they are the people that Jesus came for. The people that don't feel like they've got it together, the people that feel rejected, that feel marginalised is what the word I'm looking for. The people that are lonely, the people that are just feeling like they have nothing to offer, disqualified in some way. And so if that's one of you today, I want you to know that Jesus came for you. Not for the ones that get it all together, the ones that come to church and have this fabulous exterior, but the ones that feel like they are vulnerable and they need the Lord. They're the ones that he came for.
And isn't it funny that often that's where you find God, it's in the mess.
Yeah.
You know, we are waiting for normality to come back, but God is actually in the insecurity. He's in the mess of the world. Yeah. And I don't theologically know why we're having pandemics and earthquakes and all the other bits and pieces, but what I do know is that God does get our attention and that he's always there and he's always somebody that we can run to in that time. And we don't need to wait till the earthquake stops or until the pandemic stops. They are the times that we actually come close to him because he was born into chaos and he looks for us in the chaos.
And one of the scriptures that I've been just kind of pondering on in this time, it's in the Message and it's John 15 verse 7, and it says, "If you make yourselves at home with me and my words are at home in you, you can be sure that whatever you ask will be listened to and acted upon." And that reminds me of the fact that we do have a home, and that's in God. We do have one that is unshakable, that won't change, that he's steadfast and that he will always remain constant. And it got me thinking about how it says, "If you make yourselves at home with me." It got me thinking about what that feels like to be at home. And I think that's why I loved Grace at Your Place, because it was just in our home and I felt very relaxed. I didn't even get nervous about doing those
She even
things.
had her slippers on without realising in a couple of the things.
And I just love the fact you can have a cup of tea. And I just, like I said to you, it was just lovely being in our own home. And that's when I'm at most myself. And so that scripture that says, "If you make yourself at home with me and my words are at home in you," it makes me think, what does it look like? What would it look like to have home, a place where God is welcome, my heart, where God is welcome? I know we've had Sophie living with us for a year or so from Northern Ireland, or California now, and when she came, I was like, "Sophie, welcome to our house, and here's where everything is, and help yourself to the fridge whenever you want, and just make it like it's your place." And also the rooms are nothing's out of bounds. You know, like I said to her, this is all the rooms in the house, nothing's locked, you help yourself and just make yourself at home. And I know sometimes our natural tendency would be to just allow people just to see what we want them to see, rather than what's actually in your heart, or like there are no doors in our house that are locked. Like if she could go into any of those rooms. And sometimes for our own hearts, we have places where they're locked and we don't want God to go there. But how would it look if you're like, "God, you come in and you come into all the rooms of my heart. Everything that is mine is yours, and I want you to see me as I really am." And that's part of that transparency. And we had a lovely guy come and visit us from California. His name was Bobby, and he was right early on. The kids were really little.
He was actually a pastor from Anaheim Vineyard. He was a guy in his 60s, and he just came out to be a speaker. Never met him before, but we'd heard he was a great guy, but we were overwhelmed by how lovely he was.
Yeah, and he walked in and he went straight into his bedroom, and then he comes out and he's got his pajamas on. And it was just so, I just thought, oh, I love you already. I love you. And it was just such a beautiful picture of someone being very much at home and being himself. And the kids just loved him. They crawled all over him like a little jungle gym. And I'll never forget that, how that was to have him feel like our home was his home. And another friend of mine, she always comes, and every time she comes, she flicks off her shoes and she just puts her feet up on the couch, and that's her way of saying, I'm home, you know. And I love that picture, that we can, in our hearts, make that a place where God is home. And that's the place that we run to. I know for me too, when I've been particularly troubled, as I have been, it seems like this year's been a bit of a mishmash, as I'm sure it is for all of you, but this last week or so, I've cried so much about my mum and dad, and they're just deteriorating before my eyes. They've both got dementia, and I feel like it's a really, really slow death, and I don't know when the end is going to come, but it's so painful watching them in that place of slowly losing who they are and who I've known them to be. So I found that a real grief for me, but I keep just inviting God into that grief. And that's the thing. People around Christmas time, I think we assume that people are happy, but actual fact, Christmas is a really difficult time for people because of the fact that it often reminds you of what you don't have. It will remind you of someone dear to you that you've lost, that would have been there. I know for me, that's my brother. He committed suicide a couple of years ago, and it's his birthday the week before Christmas, and I always feel so sad about that because he should be here. And so it's mixed up with all the tensions, the sadness, the joy, the sorrow, the pain. That's what life is like, isn't it? It's all mixed up. And that's, again, what Jesus came into. Now, one of the things that I did do was another thing that I do every year is that on the 1st of November, I put my tree up this year because I thought this is a ridiculous year. And I thought, who makes the rules anyway about when your tree's supposed to go up? And so I decided I'd put it up on the 1st of November, and I just have loved it because I do all the lounge with lights and stuff. Fairy lights are my favourite, hence the fairy lights in the building. But one of the things that I bought was this little gorgeous decoration, little nativity scene, and it's so delightful. It has the picture of Mary and Joseph, and then right where the little flame is where Jesus is. Isn't it just so cute? I can't stop taking my eyes off it. I light the candle every day and just remember what he's come into. But the fact that it's glowing right where his little head is just so gorgeous. I love it. So that was one of my wee purchases this year for Christmas to bring me joy. You've got a story about that too.
Well, we had the privilege last year of going to Bethlehem, and one of the things that just struck me about Bethlehem is what a chaotic place it is just at the best of times. It was chaotic when Jesus was being born, and it's chaotic today. It's in the occupied territories. If you go to the Church of the Nativity, there are Palestinian soldiers outside, very friendly, I must say. And there were lots of
too.
Yeah, there were lots of Palestinian youth that were trying to photobomb our photos, and people were very friendly. But it's a chaotic place, and we went in amongst. There was a big mosque there, and there were lots of people standing outside the mosque, and just right near the mosque is this little Christian bookstore, and it's got lots and lots of things that they sell. And one of the things we bought was this thing here that you put on your Christmas tree. It's made of olive wood. It's Mary and Joseph, and it just says Bethlehem all the way from Bethlehem. And I thought, isn't this incredible that, even today in the year 2020, it is a chaotic place. But in amongst all the chaos, there are people like David and Lizzie and people coming from all over the world to be able to find Jesus, to find peace inside. I remember I spoke to my counsellor, and my guy who gives me spiritual direction, supervision, and he told me about a person who had gone and visited the Church of the Nativity, and that he'd had a real profound experience there. And I said, could I ring him and talk to him? And there's a very nice chap. He said that he'd gone over there, he'd gone to the Church of the Nativity, and then went to one of the side chapels. And he said that he had come over very cynical and very hard-hearted. And there was a group of people there, he said, who were singing songs that normally he would have felt very mocking towards. But he said, just in this simple way, as he heard them singing songs, he said it was like Jesus just appeared amongst them, and he said he just broke down and wept, and it really touched his heart. I went into one of the little areas, and I didn't quite have an experience like that, but I did really get a real sense of the gravity of what Jesus has done in the world, with all these thousands of people streaming in and out, and the chaos that's in the world. Just to come to these little alcoves and these little chapels, to be still in your heart and be able to find Jesus. You'll see this thing on our tree, the next photo, there it is. And it's just a little reminder that in amongst all the festivities and in amongst the chaos and everything going on, there's this wonderful story that has invaded our lives, the story of Jesus, Emmanuel, God with us, God coming into every circumstance, the joyful things, the chaotic things, the painful things, and amongst it is Jesus. And so it's not an accident that at the end of this tumultuous year, we turn our hearts towards the one that loves us so much.
And even the fact that it was to Joseph that God said, you are going to have a baby and you are going to call him Jesus, God with us. Emmanuel. And again, that was another message to Joseph that God's with you. God's in this. Whatever you're going through today, he is here and he's with you.
Sing joy. Joy to the world, the Lord is come. Let earth receive her King. Let every heart prepare him room. And heaven and nature sing. And heaven and nature sing. And heaven and nature sing. Joy to the earth, the Savior reigns. Let men their songs implore. While fields and floods, rocks, hills and plains repeat the sounding joy. Repeat the sounding joy. Repeat the sounding joy. We sing joy. We sing joy. We sing for joy. We're not without hope. He is leading us home. Yes, joy. We shout for joy. We're not without love. He has given his son. He rules, and he rules the world with truth and grace, and makes the nations prove the glories of his righteousness, and wonders of his love, and wonders of his love, and wonders of his love. Let's sing this out.